Okay.
All right.
Right to go.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So,
all right, great. So, sorry, I was just going to let everyone know that this session will be recorded. I wanted to say hi and welcome to the final day of EdFest. This session is making a real difference in the lives of children, a career in influencing and advocating for children. Just before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Darug Nation, the traditional custodians of the land I'm at today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and water. I extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are also meeting with us today. Okay, I have the pleasure of introducing you to our guest speaker today, Leslie Jones. Over her career, Leslie's had the opportunity to work alongside passionate and gifted educators, teachers, and value-driven organisations. As Head of Education for the Affinity Education Group, one of Australia's largest providers of long day care, Leslie's going to share some insights into why a career in the early years is not only important, but fulfilling and rewarding beyond measure. With over 35 years' experience in the sector, Leslie's guiding belief is that high quality educational outcomes for children rest on the capability and connectedness of the educators to the importance of the work that they undertake with young children and families. And on that pretty splendid introduction, Leslie,
Thanks for that, Carolyn, and welcome everyone to this session. I just want to say up front, thank you so much for inviting me to come along today. I was really excited to be able to spend some time with people talking about something that I'm really passionate about, and that, of course, is working with young children and families in our early childhood education and care sector. And as Carolyn just shared with you, I've been doing this work now in a range of different roles for over 35 years, and I still get an absolute buzz about talking about the work that I do and the work that our educators and teachers do in our early learning settings right across the country. And so for the next little while, I'm going to chew your ear off about what that might mean for you as you think about joining a very long, proud history of early childhood education, both here in this country, but also as part of our global community of early childhood teachers. And so I also want to, oops, that's not going to work. I also want to pay my respects to the traditional owners on the lands on which we're all meeting, which is all across the Eastern Seaboard, really, at this point in time, and to acknowledge the contributions that the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting make to the fabric of Australian society, and in particular to recognise elders past, present and emerging for their stewardship around those cultural values and influences that infuse through Australian culture and make it what it is today. And of course, a special call out for any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be with us today. And it's lovely when it's just reminded me that when we so commonly now see children in our early learning centres doing acknowledgement of country as part of how they start their day. I think it's just another little nod to the influence that our educators and teachers have on the lives of young children as we think about a shared history together between Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander peoples and those of other descents that make our nation what it is. Alrighty, so moving on, let's start putting our thinking caps on around what it means to be an early childhood teacher. And I'm sure if you've done any sort of study, or even if you're interested in this area, you will have come across the call to action about the importance of the first 5 years in a young child's life. And it's why what we do matters a whole lot in the lives of children. And so I know I'm talking to prospective students into this area, and I just also want to make the point that at the end of all of your efforts, and I know that that means long nights and study and exams and all of those things that being a student actually really means, that really take a lot of commitment and dedication and effort to get to the end of a qualification. I want you to also think that the effort that you're putting into that, there is actually young children at the end of that. There's young children and young families who actually need you to be the best that you can be. And the organisations and institutions that you're looking at studying and working in will help you to realise that aspiration to be the best early childhood professional that you can be. And because it is so important. And this little video doesn't take very long, but I think it's a really nice pull together, a really nice showcase of what puts a fire in the belly of early childhood professionals, why we feel what we do is so important and so rewarding, and is just what makes us really feel that we are contributing to the lives of children and to the lives of families. So I just need someone to just give me a thumbs up that this video is playing all right for you, that you can hear it. Thumbs up. So there you go. I think honestly, Caroline, you know, students need that little video playing in the background when they're sitting up at midnight studying for an exam, right? That's why we do what we do. And Marta, when you were saying before, you were sharing with us a little bit how you feel about early childhood, I was thinking of this video. So a really nice way to gather our thoughts as I then talk about why I feel working in early childhood and studying in early childhood is such a rewarding opportunity for you to take on. So as we start to, as I was thinking about, so what does it actually really mean to work in early childhood? And I thought it would be nice to share with you just, if you could capture it in one word, working in early childhood is diverse. People working with young children and families come from a whole diverse range of qualifications, and even your university definitely has a range of qualifications that mean at the end of that you'll be working with children and families. And within the sector we have so many diverse roles, and as our sector continues to mature we find that our roles continue to expand and evolve and refine, so that we're offering expertise to families and children in so many more different ways than when we look at the earlier years in our sector. So there's so many opportunities for you to find exactly the right place where you feel that you have a place and a space, and more importantly, a voice for children and for families. It certainly comes with diverse experiences. The families and children that I've had and the teams that I've had the joy of working with over 35 years have just been so broad and such depth. from families working in isolation in rural and regional Australia to families working through diversity and challenge, to families working in urban and metropolitan areas that have all the challenges of a fast-paced life raising their family, and also the different centres. Every centre, every childcare centre, every kindergarten that you work in, by its very nature is different. And so this work is never boring because of the diversity that we have the opportunity to dip in and dip out of as we work. And of course, all of our work is centred in communities. And so again, that diversity means that those communities are different by definition. And when we think about particularly the breadth and depth of what makes up the Australian country, we can see the diversity in communities from Torres Strait Islander communities. We're on Thursday Island and far north Queensland in the Cape, right through to the most urban of our metropolitan cities in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. And so it's an opportunity for a really diverse professional journey. There is no one singular way to have a career in early childhood. There are so many opportunities that present themselves. And I guess mine is sort of almost a typical, if not maybe a slightly amplified example of exactly that diversity. So I thought I'd just share with you a little bit because it doesn't really seem to me all that long ago since I was sitting in a seat very much like you are right now. And so my story starts with, I came to early childhood as an adult, mature age student. I already had our family of 4 children before I decided that this was something that I really found interesting and wanted to continue with. But at that point, I hadn't even finished high school. I left high school when I was only 15. And so I really began my academic career right from the foundation stages of having to do a Certificate 3 and then a university entrance qualification before I could even begin. So Certificate 3, then diploma, and then degree, masters, and then a PhD. And all of that really has been driven by a never-ending sense of excitement and passion about the opportunities of understanding more about young children and their families and the teams that actually support them, their educative teams that support them to be the best that they can be. But in terms of not just the study progression that I've personally experienced, so I've also spent many a long night sitting up writing assignments and essays and sitting for exams and getting nervous about doing group presentations. And in building all of those skills, the joy that I've found is that it's a qualification and a study pathway that allows you to take that into the real world, into the workplace, where you can actually test out those theories and ideas with real children and with real families. And so some of the actual working opportunities that this career has provided for me have started with a practice environment. So working in a contact teaching roles in both, assisting, educating roles, as well as then teaching roles. But it has also led me to leading teams and also to senior management and executive roles. So Chief Operating Officer for large organisations, estate manager for one of our largest organisations, where I was in charge of a team of up to 4,000 people at one point, to working where I'm working right now, which is Affinity Education Group, where I have the privilege of heading up the education side, the education team. So the education strategy for educational programs and practices for our centres and supporting our educators and teachers around refining and working on their practice and pedagogy skills in delivering those educational programs to young children. I've also been on the board of a publicly listed company as part of my role and expertise in early childhood. I've ran a private consultancy for well in excess of 20 years, and I've built some real expertise around things like guiding and supporting children's behaviour and leadership. And so from those little beginnings of just having a passion about enjoying being with children, you never know where this career might take you. And it's only limited by your own imagination and your own eagerness to stretch into the opportunities that are likely to come your way. I just then wanted to talk about some of the realizations that I've had as a result of the 35 years of working in this sector that I've had. And I've come to the very firm belief that working in early childhood is like working in no other profession that I can actually bring to mind. Of course, our most closely aligned profession is that of working in formal education in primary schools. But we do have some significant differences to that. And the differences that we have are the things that I make that I feel make our sector really, really special. First and foremost, those of us working with children and families in early years have an opportunity to have a very long-term involvement with children and families. Most of our children join us when they're in that infant toddler age group and stay with us until they are ready for school. But because of the size of most of our institutions, it means that our educators and teachers working in our long day care centres have an opportunity to really get to know families on a very intimate level. And of course, we see families twice a day. And I know many school teachers that would give their right arm to have that sort of level of access and the level of relationship with families that we have as a matter of course in the early years. So it really is work that is anchored in the relationships rather than transactions. So if you're a people person, this is the sort of work that you'll find eminently engaging, because our whole work is anchored in the relationships that we have with each other as team members. So you're working in a team environment and a quite close team environment. It's in the relationships that you have with children. And of course, that should always be the primary reason that people want to work in the early years, is the ability to mix and have relationships with children. And also anchored in the relationships with families. And that is sometimes a really important part of how we work. We work in partnership with families, and that means that insight into families, the relationships that we have with families, allows us to have really deep understanding of where children are coming from, and that makes our work just that little bit easier. And so it is, as I say, anchored in relationships rather than transactions, which is a really special part of being an early childhood professional. And part of that is also this notion around holistic engagement with families. So what I mean by that is the nature of the work that we do with families means that we get to see families at the happy times, and unfortunately we also get to see them at the sad times and the challenging times. And so we see this lifelong aspect of family life with the children for those first 5 years that we're with them. And often when we think about other professions that bump up against families and children, they don't necessarily have that intimacy, the longevity of relationships, and they don't often see the ups and downs that families go through. And so that tapestry of family life is also something that's a real privilege and an honour to be involved with. We have testimonials coming in from families in, well, every organisation I've ever worked in, to be honest, where families take the time to actually share with us just how much we mean to them as we work with their children, but support them as that family unit. And of course, teachers working in primary schools have this same aspect as well. They see families when they're doing really well, and they see families when they're not doing so well. But the difference is almost in the volume of that contact. As I say, we get to see families at least twice a day, because families have to bring children in and bring them out. Where in school, teachers normally would get to see their families far less frequently in that, and sometimes only a couple of times a year. And so there is a difference in the depth of relationship and the intimacy of the relationship that you can have with families and children working in the early years as opposed to working in other forms of education. One of the things I think that for me, and certainly it's one of my soapboxes that I get up onto often, is that we know through evidence, through research, that the work that our educators and teachers do in these first few vital years, those first 5 years of a child's life, has a really strong influence on child outcomes, but also on the family unit themselves. And so when we look at evidence coming through, for instance, from the Mitchell Institute on the evidence around the difference that children having access to an early learning program for at least 1 to 2 years before they start school, we know that that actually makes an evidenced impact on their ability to function at school, on their school results. We also know that that protective factor of being in a high quality early learning environment lasts for their entire childhood and into adulthood. So the work and the investment and the commitment that our people have in these first few years of working with children is just so critical. It's so important that we get it right, but it is also so influential. And if you're doing that work, you have a place in that influence. And that's incredibly rewarding work, to see that you've helped a child learn concepts, to build confidence, to become socially and emotionally resilient. All of those things are things that our people can be justifiably proud of contributing towards, and helping families find their feet to be confident parents in a very busy lifestyle. And Lord knows, in the last 2 years, we've had an awful lot of external pressures on families. And to be the person in that place that families can turn to for support and guidance, and to have that influencing role to sort of help them find their feet, is an incredibly privileged position, and one that is also a very rewarding one. And in general, when we look at early learning as opposed to other allied health professionals that work with families, so other people that bump up against families and children, we have the benefit of always working from a strength-based perspective with children and families, which is sort of adds another lens across how we understand children and families. And I'll give you an example. By its very nature, when children see people like paediatricians, or they see speech pathologists, for instance, those people have to understand what the problem is. So that's really identifying what the problem is and then working to solve it. A couple of things happen from that. One, it's not the same as being from a strength-based perspective, where we're looking at the good things as well as the things that are challenging. And they have to do that, right, because they're trying to solve a problem. But on top of that, it usually means that those people see families and children for a very short period of time while they're working with that particular problem and working on that. So it's a very zeroed in focused, where again, when you're working in early childhood yourself, it's very holistic. So you get to see the problem, but also get to see the strength, and you also get to see the progression, which is, you know, it's a really nice feeling to be involved in that holistic nature of the journey with young children. And so then I think about that notion of how we actually influence families. And as I was doing this, it sort of really popped up to me that when we're influencing and making changes and advocating for children, we do that actually in big ways as well as little ways. And so what we do really does matter an awful lot. And so if I think about being part of a profession that advocates for children, let's talk about some of the big things that people that work in this sector have achieved in about the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, people working in the early years have advocated and won for better working conditions and pay for the people who are doing this role. Banded together, those professionals have been heard. They've been heard by unions, they've been heard by government, and they've been heard by communities about setting the expectations that what we do is important and that we need better working conditions and pay. That wouldn't have happened without a consolidated voice coming from our profession, a holistic, consolidated voice. We've also contributed to some really important public policy. So if you've even begun a little bit of study already, you will know that we're highly regulated and that we have some government public policy that informs the way that we work. Chief among them are the National Quality Framework, the National Quality Standards, and the Early Years Learning Framework for Australia. And those documents are huge public policy documents that inform the way in which our entire sector works. And ordinary educators and people working with children and families were so influential in the writing of all of those documents. Governments were listening to what we're saying coming from the field, coming from centres, and you can hear the educator voice infused through all of those documents. And so that's a pretty big influence to have been part of, and quite revolutionary in the space of the last 10 years to take our profession along that more professionalising the profile of early childhood in Australia. And then on top of that, because we have such a critical role with families, as a collective voice, we have fought very, very hard with the federal government in this country over the last 10 years to really advocate for the affordability of childcare for families. We know that when families are able to actually have their child attend childcare, it's great for children, it's critically important for children, but it also allows families to get on with the work of what they need to do as a young family. And that includes working, it includes studying. And so the early childhood sector plays a duality of roles in our Australian communities. One is about supporting that individual family unit and helping children to have that best early childhood experience so that they can be the best individual peoples when they leave us. But it's also about making sure that we're supporting families so that we can actually really help them to become better family units, more confident family units, and be able to do the things that they need to do in order to raise their family in 2022. And then in small ways, then I sort of zoomed right in and thought about what is the influence that you might have as an early childhood educator and teacher with our families and children. And so we definitely help individual families build confidence and help to build stronger families because of the things that we do. And we have this wonderful opportunity every day that we go to work to make memories for children about their childhood. And I think if you think right now, just for a second, about what are the fondest early childhood memories that you have, then those are the sorts of things that you can help children have. The children that you would be working with will look back on the time that they spend with you. And they may not remember your name always, but they certainly do remember how you make them feel. And that's a wonderful feeling to know that you've had that sort of impact on children and on families, and something that just gives you a really lovely warm feeling. And of course, you don't have to wait until they're 20 to hear that sort of stuff. We have families sharing with us all the time about the difference that we make in the lives of children. When we help a young child who is anxious to leave mum and dad, and we can see them within a matter of a couple of months being confident and engaged young children that have friends and can make friends and can enter play and can be involved in the room. That's a real buzz, folks, that you have a place, you've had a part in that journey. And to see a first-time parent be completely really overwhelmed by what it means to be a first-time parent, and to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and help them understand, you can do this, you've got this, and we'll help you along the way, then that's also a completely affirming process and a real privilege to be part of that family's growth in terms of their competency as being a family member. And we are often the very first point of contact for families outside of the family home. We are often the very first community structure that young families bump up against as they move towards their children being in the broader world. And so we are very often the go-to person for things like advice and information. And that means that we are often also the one constant professional that works with them, which goes to the relationship piece that I was talking about earlier. We're there for hopefully the better part of 5 years for those families. And so they do really become to rely on us. And we often hear families say that we're like part of their family. And we certainly feel that they're part of ours. And that's a really nice thing about working in the early years. And if I then think about, I wanted to share with you just how subtle yet how powerful the influence that educators and teachers can have on families. And so we have, because of the relationship piece, we have this opportunity to really influence others' heads, hearts and hands about children, right? So often we think of our role about how we engage with children and what we have to do with children, and so it becomes very microscopic. But in actual fact, in our everyday moments, both those big moments, but also in all the little moments, we can actually make a difference on influencing people, not just parents, but ordinary people, about how they see children, how they understand children, and how they can help children experience childhood and really engage with children themselves. And so this photo that I've included on this slide was actually taken from one of our services about 12 months ago. I just happened to walk out into the playground, and this very young educator had a moment, and she did this on a chalkboard in the playground. And I actually asked her, I said, were you asked to do that, or how did that come around? And she said, no, I just thought, you know, she'd had an experience talking to a family who she really was trying to advocate for them to, you know, stop and smell the roses a little bit. And she felt, I thought it could be something that I just wanted to get out there. I just wanted to sort of families just to see it and stop and pause. And I thought that's the subtlety of some of the influences that we can have for families. And so just imagine what might happen if during your career, you just helped a handful of families every year to understand how important their role is for their children, or if you just helped adults and families to see children the way that you do, to see them the way that you understand children, what would our communities be like? And that's the wonderful opportunity that we have when we're working in early childhood, because we can be so influential. And in that space of influence, that's where you can advocate. That's where you can really be the voice of children when they need you to be. And just to be that external little voice to families, to sort of, like this young educator did, just to sort of say, make sure you stop and smell the roses. Make sure you don't miss that moment in your child's life. And then when we're having those moments with their children, to make sure that we're sharing it back to them, so that it's that real reciprocal relationship that helps families understand just how amazing those first 5 years of a child's life can be. And I'm sure in your own adult life, you will have heard either your parents or grandparents or aunties or uncles or whoever it may be tell you sometimes how quickly it seems that children grow up. And so we have not only a voice in that, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that busy families actually, and busy adults, don't miss what's happening for young children around them. And that's not just about working with families, right? I'm a bit of a soapbox person, even when we're at barbecues, about making sure that we are actually listening, that the adult world is listening to children, because children have an awful lot to say if we care to take the time to listen. And then I suppose I just, in along this same thing, I really wanted to just take a moment to help you understand that as you're considering a career in early childhood, that it's not just about the here and the now, that you are actually joining a profession that's it's about being part of something bigger than just yourself. So you and people like myself and the colleagues that I've had over the years, we have a role and a responsibility to really help shape the future of our nation's citizens and our younger citizens. But we know that the impact and influence that we have means we influence right through their life. And I could give you lots of evidence around the research that says how long the early years influence lasts, but it really is right throughout life. And so it starts here in these first 5 years. And so we really do have, I mean, I know that sounds like a lofty thing to say, but people who work in this space, you are shaping the future of this country's younger citizens. And you're also becoming part of this really rich and proud history in this country, but also as part of the global early childhood, early years profession. And that's sort of something nice to think about, right? That you're thinking of joining something and becoming a part of something much bigger than just a job or a role. And so some of our most amazing people in this country, the amazing professionals, have led the way. And when I look at a group of people like yourself, and I have taught students for many years as well in different roles that I've had, I often look around the room and go like, I wonder what you're going to have contributed in 30 years' time. I know what I've contributed in 30 years. I wonder what you'll do. And when I'm old and rocking in a nursing home somewhere, you guys are going to be doing the most amazing things with children and young people, because that's the opportunity that you have in front of you. And so some of the little pictures that I've got there on the slide, I mean, we have had people dedicated and thinking about the lived experiences of children and families for the last 127 years in this country. And when you start your path of study in the early years, you're joining that profession, you're joining that history. And so KU was one of the first services, so that's New South Wales. So some of you may have known or been to a KU service, who knows. And then you've got obviously Lady Gowrie, who was in the mid-50s, who just revolutionised early years. And we've had people like our Governor-General, Quentin Bryce, and people like women's rights advocates like Wendy McCarthy, all of those people advocating for the right for children to have an early childhood education as an educational right, the right for women to have access to affordable childcare so that they can actually contribute to their family's economic success, and also then have children have the richest experience, because we know how important it is. And so right now, if we look right now in this country, there are 7,500 long day care centres and kindergartens right across Australia. And every day we support 1.4 million children to have the sort of early learning experiences that we know are so important. And that means that we're also working with and supporting 900,000 families in every community right across the country. And even when we've got the tyranny of distance in this country, where people live thousands of miles from cities, we have things like in Queensland, where we have virtual kindergartens, where we used to have kindergartens on trains in some states, where they would train and chuff into a town so that children could still have those rich early learning experiences. So we've really invested both culturally and financially and professionally in making sure that our younger citizens get the right start to their life. And you're considering joining that piece of advocacy and work. I'm really excited for you to do that. But we also know study's tough. And so I just wanted to have this slide to talk to you about the organisation that I'm here representing today, which is Affinity Education Group. And we have got a very strong commitment in this organisation to really make sure that we're helping people just like you join our profession. So if you're interested in finding out more about how we do that, and you can see on the side there that we really offer our people scholarship pathways where we fund your university study. I head up the team that does an awful lot of professional development with our people to make sure that it's that our skills don't get stale, so that what you're learning at university or at college, we keep adding to that and stretching your thinking and keeping you really fresh and contemporary across modern contemporary practices. And we also know that we have in our organisation, we've got a real commitment to internal progression. So 80% of our internal promotions come from our very own people. And so we have a real commitment to helping our people become the best professional versions of themselves that they can be. And I have a really lovely responsibility of helping them get there in terms of their pedagogies and practices. But there's also an awful lot of structural support for people to earn as well as study in this organisation. So you can see the website there. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more, then please reach out, because we'd be really keen to have a further conversation about how we might sort of progress that conversation with you. And then finally, before I sort of ask if there is any questions, I just wanted to give you a bit of a mum moment, I suppose, a bit of advice coming to about my career. So these are my tips for having a career like mine, which has been totally amazing and impactful in many ways. And so be bold and be brave. You know, that notion around seize the day, seize the opportunity, seize the moment, because you will find when you're working in this sector, you'll have lots of those moments. So keep looking to the horizon, because you just never know what might be coming around the corner. And I'm testament to that. You never know what opportunity might come your way. Know your own professional identity, know what you stand for, and really think about what it is that you stand for. What are your values and what are your beliefs? Because it really will influence your career in very significant ways. And so know yourself as a professional, and you don't have to know perfectly at the moment, you're only just studying, but keep self-aware of who you are becoming as a professional, because it shows to those around you. Your leadership shadow shows to those around you, and what you stand for shows eminently to children and to families. So be aware. Find ways to stay passionate and energised about your work, and never be afraid to show it because it's catchy. And I'm hoping that you've sensed that from me. This is, I find, the most wonderful career, the most wonderful work. And so don't be afraid to show that to other people, because that positivity and energy that comes from being passionate about what you're working and having your professional cup full about the opportunities and joy of working with children is really important. And that's not to say that every day is a happy day, because it isn't. It's also challenging work. But staying passionate helps you to balance those times that are professionally challenging and those that are just an absolute joy, and have fun along the way. Look to the horizon for those opportunities. There's never an endpoint to your learning or to your experience. I still learn every day that I go to work. And you know what? I think for a very long period of time, I've learned more from the people I work with than I have from textbooks at times. So that learning opportunity never goes away. I think it's really important to be humble and appreciative of others, and chief amongst those that you need to be appreciative of are the children that you will work with and the families that you'll have an opportunity to know. In that space of being humble and being appreciative, you will find some of the most valuable life experiences that you're likely to come across in a professional sense. So look out for them too. Try to surround yourself with people who can stretch your thinking. That's so important. As I said, I learn all the time from people that I go out to be in centres with right now. And so you have to be open to that notion around people stretching your thinking. And when you lean into that, it's actually quite an exciting process. And you will be amazed at what you can learn every day when you're open to it. And this next one I think is really important, because I think we often get a bit caught up with this about needing people to tell us how wonderful it is what we do. You don't need that. Don't look for that external validation all the time for the value in your role. You need to value yourself. You need to understand what you do is important and is of value, but you need to actually value that you are important. You are doing the work yourself. If you value yourself, and then others will follow your lead. So don't look for that external validation all too much, because it really needs to come from you first. And most importantly, look for organisations where your values and your visions align. It's a powerful partnership when you get it right, and it leads to a really fulfilling career. And I have been incredibly blessed and fortunate to have worked with organisations that have provided me with opportunity, provided me with stretch, and provided me with the opportunity to sort of be aligned in values and beliefs. And that's been an incredibly wonderful experience. I'm really excited for where you might take your career. And that's all I was going to bang on about today. I hope that that's been a little bit of a window of insight into what it can be like to work in the early years in this country. Buckle up, folks. It's an amazing ride. And so I wonder if there's just any questions that anyone might have of me before I let you very busy people get back to the rest of your day. Just come off mute if you need to say something, or you can, that's a bit tricky, put it in the chat box. That's okay too.
Yeah.
Marta.
Wonderful talk. Yeah. You're so inspiring and I love it. This is why I chose this community. I feel like these past few days, I've just been exposed to this kind of energy and it's just amazing. Do you have, because you said you started as a mature student, do you think there's any barriers or like any ways to deal with like the insecurity of maybe starting this career later? Isn't like I changed careers?
No, not at all.
So, okay.
Not at all, Marta.
Because I get in my head sometimes about like, oh, they're just gonna see my resume, and obviously like I'm at this age and my resume is not as qualified or whatever. Sometimes I just worry about that.
No, so you can put that one to bed, because that's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. So, and I also think, as I mentioned in one of the slides, that this is one of those careers where people can flex in and flex out. So we certainly have people of a whole range of different ages even that are doing different roles in the early years. And there is always a space and a place for someone, particularly someone who is one, qualified, and secondly, has that fire in their belly about wanting to do the best for children and for families. I can guarantee you won't find that an impediment that you've started this career at the age that you are.
Okay.
And I've even had people make career changes, and they've been like, I think the most bizarre one was an army drill sergeant. And he decided that he wanted to make a career change where he could make a real difference. And he joined early years. And I thought, wow, that is some career change. And he loved every second of it. So I'm excited for you, Marta. I think you'll find this really fulfilling.
I'm so excited. This has been wonderful. Thank you for your energy. It's been great.
As I say, it's a bit of a soapbox for me. Lee's probably going like, oh, will you just wrap it up? Any other questions from anyone? Sarah, anything from you? All good?
Yes, all good. I just want to second Marta there. It was just, so seeing your energy is just, yeah, just very inspiring just to continue. I'm working at an early childhood centre at the moment, so just revitalize me. So they continue doing that, and I'm really excited to get back to work. I'm isolated with the flooding, so I'm like, I want to get back to work now. I want to kind of do that, but yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, good luck getting back to work. Hope that's pretty soon. So I guess, Carolyn, over to you. Any final wrap-ups before we let these people go?
No, I think that's great. If there were no final questions, you've actually got Leslie right here. But otherwise, the session has been recorded. So people who registered and weren't able to attend, they'll be able to view that. I'd like to thank Leslie very much for that really interesting presentation. Your passion shines through immensely, makes me want to do a career change.
Well, come on over.
Me too.
But thank you very much. It's been really great.
Awesome. Okay, folks, well, I'll let you get back. Stay safe in all this crazy weather, and who knows, I might see you out and about in our centres sometime. Catch you later.
Thanks,
Love
Leslie.
that. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.